Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Download, where we bring you discussion and analysis from a Catholic perspective. Today's Wednesday, September 27th, 2023. I'm Christine Niles here with my two co-hosts, Trey Brock and Bradley Eli. A survey released earlier this year seems to suggest the key to happiness is getting married and having children. The Institute for Family Studies recently highlighted data from the 2022 General Social Survey, which found 40% of married women with children described themselves as, quote, very happy, on the far right in this chart, in contrast with only 17% of single mothers and 22% of unmarried women without kids. And a similar trend goes for men. 35% of married men with children called themselves very happy, in contrast to only 12% of single dads and 14% of single men without kids. The survey looked at American adults 18 to 55 years of age. Dr. Jennifer Roback Morse of the Ruth Institute weighed in, saying, quote, "We are happiest when we are loving and being loved." That is so true. That is so true in my experience as a mother of four children. They are the greatest joy of my life. I can't imagine not having them. I remember when I was growing up and kind of in early 20s, I was terrified of having children, because that's just sort of the atmosphere that we're raised in now. There was once a time when, as girls, you're sort of raised with the understanding that, yes, you're supposed to prepare for marriage and family, and here are the tools to, home economics and cooking and cleaning. And women just aren't raised that way anymore. And we're raised to think about career and education and not really marriage and family. And so many people are putting it off and not realizing, they're putting off their greatest joy.
Yeah, I was so many years in religious life and really enjoyed that very much. Never was really divided during that time. And there was a startup community that went, by the wayside. And I realized looking back now that really helped me so much in preparing to be a good father. A lot of fathers also are not, if you ask, what's in it for marriage? Well, I'll marry a pretty girl, get a lot of money, maybe travel around, someday have some kids or something like that. And once you start to realize what life is all about and the family and your commitment to your family and this type of thing, it really does change your perspective, and it makes it so much easier to have a fulfilling family when you really have that whole Catholic formation, which took me years really to have. And I'm very thankful for all of that, bringing that into the family. How do I relate to my children? How do I relate to my wife and the family unit and all that type of stuff? It's very, very important for fathers to get a Catholic formation on what Catholic family life really is all about and what their role is there. It's a little domestic church, a little monastery type thing, raising Catholic saints who are going to be able to go out into the world and live their lives to the fullest in whatever ways God calls them to do that. You're helping to be sanctified in that, and yourself. You're helping to bring up your wife, helping her to become a saint, helping your children to become saints. Because in the end, that's what it's all about, that we all carry on that family life. All of us have to get to heaven to do that, for all eternity, have that, share in that family in heaven. So a lot of really good stuff there.
Yeah, working with the Catholic high school that I used to be with, I used to run this program. It was called Catholic Athletes for Christ. It was before school, and it was called Catholic Athletes for Christ, but it's basically just a catechism for them. And to your point about how this modern mindset where everything is about work, especially for the girls. Everything is work. Go to, what you do after high school. Well, of course, you go to college so you can get a job and whatnot. And for the guys, it's kind of the same mentality. Your worth is basically just, what job you get after you graduate high school or college. And I remember towards the very end, I think it was the last class that I did with him before I left that school. I told him, I was like, because we talked a lot about vocation, and I just said very simply, because I was thinking in my head, I was like, because they're not being told this, and it's obvious because I have conversations with them, I just need to tell them something very basic. Like, you men, I pointed to the guys that were there, you men, You can, be a husband and a father. That's what most people do. Or you can go be a priest. You can go be religious. And then you girls, you're called to womanhood. You're called to be a mother and a wife, or you're called to the religious life. And obviously that's very kind of generalized. But I felt the need to do that because of what you just talked about. How that is not that most basic reality. That's not there. That's not a foundation they have. Even in Catholic schools.
Absolutely, and I think the reason that so many marriages and families fail today is because women and men are not being taught these things, that what they're created for, what their vocations should be and are. And also, we are an incredibly selfish generation, and we just keep getting more and more selfish. I think a lot of women, if they're raised as girls to focus on career and education, and they're not being taught things like, this is how you cook, this is how you clean, this is how you do these things. You're not taught, and you don't do any babysitting or watching children. Well, you get married and then you have your first child. It comes as a shock because it does take tremendous sacrifice. You're a parent, it takes tremendous patience, tremendous sacrifice. It stretches you in every single way possible, sometimes to the breaking point, but all in good ways. Those women who come into this with this foundation of this understanding that, yes, this is what I'm created for, this is what I'm made for, this is what I'm meant to do, and yes, this implies sacrifice, they're not so shocked by it. But the other women are. They're shocked. They're like, this is hard. This is really hard. It's not supposed to be this hard. Okay, I can't do this anymore. Let me have an abortion. I can't do this anymore. Yeah.
Well, even just bringing up basic differences, it's so messed up. But this was going on in my head when I would talk to them. I would say, boys, and then boys, you're called to manhood. Girls, you're called. Even just saying boys and girls, in that little classroom, I felt like a criminal. I felt a little awkward because it's not what people do now. Just that very basic thing. You guys are different, and it goes back to something Pope Pius XI. I think it's. Divini Ilius Magistri. He says in there very, very simple. He just says that coeducation is harmful to education or harmful to children, something like that. But I would think about that a little bit when I was boys, girls, and it's oh shoot, I'm a little edgy right now. I'm making some distinctions here.
Well, even a Catholic psychologist friend of mine I talked to some years ago, he said it's just starting to become in vogue. This was probably 15 years ago now, but anyway, he was saying it was just becoming in vogue now to start saying boys and girls are different. There's actually a difference, and he's a Catholic psychologist, and to say otherwise, you're going against the whole grain of the institution. So let's look at some reasons why it's so difficult today to actually have that conversation. Why are women not being prepared? Why are they all being sent off to the careers? Why are boys and girls, the whole thing being so confused, and now we have this transgender thing going on? And it all goes back to Satan's final attack on the family. Cardinal Caffarra, he was actually Archbishop Emeritus of Bologna. Carlo Caffarra, he's dead now. He died in September 2017, God rest his soul. He's one of the dubia cardinals with Bishop Burke and others who kind of wanted clarification coming out of Amoris Laetitia on marriage and the family. In May of 2017, he actually was at the Rome Life Forum, 100 life and family leaders there in 2017. And he spoke there, and he told an interesting incident. He was actually asked to start this the Pontifical John Paul II Institute for Studies on Marriage and the Family. And he said it was very, very difficult going in the early 80s to get that started. He was so distressed about that he actually wrote to Sister Lucia. Just popped into his brain, I'm going to write to her about this and say, tell all my woes that are happening. And this was in '84. And she wrote back. And he says, I've given sworn testimony to the veracity of this letter. And he said the letter ended, her letter, Sister Lucia's letter to him in '84 ended this way. She says, it was no great surprise that she wrote that this is all the problem for you. She said, Father, a time will come when the decisive battle between the kingdom of Christ and Satan will be over marriage and the family. And those who will work for the good of the family will experience persecution and tribulation. But do not be afraid, because Our Lady has already crushed his head, end quote. And right there, that was in, Sister Lucia was one of the child seers of Fatima in 1917. And she knew, she was told by Our Lady that Satan's final battle would go against the family. Because why? If you can take down the family, there's nothing left. I mean, all of your future priests come from there. All your future political leaders come from there. You've just undercut the whole next generation. And that's why they say when a nation, when a civilization regularly implodes on itself, it's from within almost always before taken from without. and it ends very, very quickly. Because when it gets to that corruption, all of a sudden you don't have anything to carry on that next generation. It's game over. And we're kind of getting there right now with this whole, pederasty movement and the homosexuality thing and transgender movement, and the kids are standing up saying, why aren't my political leaders, my church, why is my profession, medical professionals, nobody's saying anything about this. They get transgender surgery and then come out a few years later and they're all like, nobody stopped this, But this family that we're talking about, girls are not raised to want to be good mothers. Guys are raised to be effeminate. Whether you're in a priesthood or family marriage, you need to be a man with all of what goes along with that, defending the weak and, providing and protecting and all of that type of stuff. And it's just not there. Yeah. The masculinity is not there. The femininity is not there. And that doesn't make a good blend when you go, bar hopping and you wind up married and now two people are there and then you have a child on the way and neither one of you is an adult.
Yeah.
It's children raising children today. So
yeah, well, it seems today that I think it's fair to say that with all the attacks on the family and that quote from Sister Lucia or Cardinal Kafara talking about how the family is being attacked more than ever, well, it seems to me that the nuclear family is the biggest threat to this agenda that is trying to obviously destroy the family. And so it seems like that vocation, marriage and the family, seems more vital than ever. Mm-hmm. So if guys or girls are wondering what they should do with that's a noble thing to do. That's an honorable thing to do, especially today, because it's a huge threat to that sort of regime. I remember even because you talked about how men, boys are being castrated through their education. They're being made to be effeminate, and then girls are essentially being brutalized, turning them into men and acting as if there's no distinctions. I remember I had to think about this a little bit whenever I was actually coaching track. I did that for a couple of years at the high school level, and I was thinking to myself, I was like, can I coach? Because I coach boys and girls as a high school track, and I was thinking to myself, can I coach them the same way? Ought I coach them the exact same way? Because with the guys, it's all about being competitive and aggressive, and it's all about winning and all that. And of course, they're going to develop virtue and whatnot. But for the girls, it's like, well, is that good for them? Do I lead them to that competitive, aggressive sort of charism? And it's like, well, of course not, because that's not their nature. And so I had to change up my coaching style a little bit, but it goes back to your point that you just talked about, where it's like, if you are making men to be more effeminate, and then if you're making women to be more brutalized, more like men, or women to be more like men, well, then you're doing the very opposite of education. You're supposed to be leading them towards their nature as made in God's image and likeness.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I have a great devotion to the Holy Family. I always love to contemplate, meditate on Jesus, Mary, and Joseph in their little home in Nazareth, and just what peaceful, loving life that must have been. I just love meditating on that. And if you think about it, each person in any nuclear family shows a facet of God. You've got the father who's supposed to be the defender and the protector and the one who's providing for the family, fighting for the family, that sort of thing. Then you have the woman who's supposed to be the maternal aspect, the one who's consoling, the one who's helping to raise the children, the one who's the support for the husband and the father. And then you've got the child who reflects the simplicity and the innocence, and the joy of God. And all of those together are so beautiful, and that's why I think it is crucial, even among those who are not called to family but have vocations to the priesthood or religious life. I think it's crucial that there be that element in any of these communities. So, for instance, even if it's an all-male community, still many, even for instance, Pope John Paul II had close relationships with very holy women. You can look throughout the history of the saints, and there was almost always the male saint having a close relationship with a female saint, and they would help each other because a woman can provide insights that a man might never have, just like a man would provide insights that a woman never have. I think it all goes together.
Yeah.
It all goes together.
Yeah, and in the study it says marital status is most influential when it comes to predicting happiness in the study. And obviously, you guys who have families, you guys can speak to this better than I can. But it seems to me that the reason marriage and the family is so such an antidote to this sort of nihilistic culture that we live in that is destroying the family, and where people, it's because of the sense of mission that's inherent to that. So if you have kids, if you're married and you have kids or whatever it is, your mission, your purpose, it never ceases. You're sort of forced to serve, and obviously you don't do it because you're forced, you do it because you want to. St. Thomas Aquinas in the church itself just says that the primary end of marriage, it's not just procreation. It's raising those children up, educating those children to be saints, to be children of God, and to be good Christian men, good Christian women, free and liberated and joyful as they go through life. But you guys can speak to that better than I can. The sense of mission, the sense of purpose, it never goes away.
Well, there's the platitude, it's better to give than to receive. People treat it as trite platitude, but it really is true. If the selfish people are the most miserable people because they live for themselves, but people who are selfless and they live for others, like for their family, for their children, they are the most joyful people in the world. And there's a reason for that. We're created for sacrifice. We are created for that. Can it be hard in the moment? Of course, but it pays off, not just in the outward results, but also in the interior. It gives you greater peace and greater joy, because what are we doing? We're following the example of Christ, who lived a life of sacrifice.
Yeah,
that sacrifice in the home, and that if it starts at a very early age too, where a lot of kids are cocooning today. They go off in their little room, and they got their little headphones, they got the little cell phone, they got their TV, they got their own little nucleus, and it's like, don't come in here, okay? Well, that's not the way it is in our house, okay? But the problem is when it happens that way, and you have your own space, the guy has his own den, and the woman has her own space, and everybody's like separate, and that was one of the religious actually commented on that back in the day in the 60s. He saw this in religious life too. He's going down the hallway of these different religious, and they have their doors open, but there's a guy with the TV in his room, and another religious in his room, there's no common shared space. There's no sacrifice there because of the idea that I'm going to watch my show, and I don't care what you're watching, you're going to watch your show, and everybody's fragmented and separated and pulled away. This dissipation that just keeps going on. And so the idea that, everybody gets together, there's quality family time. That you have there was who was the guy that said the family that prays together stays together in the 70s? Well, yeah, we have our family rosary, Father Peyton, and we have our family rosary in the evening. But I'm saying the family that has a meal together today is staying together, sharing that common life, that family life, that togetherness time is really very important.
That is so crucial. And I did not have an idyllic childhood by any means, but one thing that my father always insisted on every night, we had to eat together as a family, always, no exceptions. Could not watch TV. He was very firm about that. We always were together, at least at mealtime, for the family. And something else as Catholics too, in addition to doing that, you mentioned the family rosary. I think that is crucial. I think any Catholic family out there that's not praying the family rosary, I'm sorry, I don't know how you expect to survive without praying the family rosary, especially fathers. You should be leading that for your family.
Yeah, that's really a very, very special time. That's when everything kind of winds down in the house. That's when the kids get more relaxed, get them all prepared for bed. We have a rosary, we have a nice little altar there and everything like that. So that's a very important time, and it just transitions into an evening, a nice peaceful night. There's been a few times, you go out somewhere or do something or other, you come back and, maybe your prayers like, oh, I'm telling you, all hell breaks loose at nighttime. This kid's screaming, that's right. We're like, we're never going through that again. No, you're going to do this. The other thing I do as a father, too, bless each of the children at nighttime, and we found that that's been very helpful. But this survey, I just want to call up this survey again, that the General Social Survey of 2022, it says it all, that the married fathers are happiest. The percent of men reporting they are very happy if they are married and have children. That's the highest category. Married with children is the highest category. The second category, and these are very high, by the way. These two are the married side. So married with children and married, and this one's without children. Okay, so you don't have children, you're almost as happy as if you have them, but I mean that's probably because you're not able to at the time or whatever. But the idea that marriage, huge thing for fathers out for men out there, being married, huge thing. Then unmarried, is almost the same here. Whether you have children or not, you're extremely unhappy down at this end. But the highest category is married with children, and guess what? That's just God's nuclear family. You know, you think God actually kind of maybe knew what he was doing when he put the family together. And that Pope Francis, yes, he's promoted a lot of crazy things like Father James Martin and all that type of stuff. And why does he do that? Okay, between him and God, take it up with him. But one thing he says is a child deserves a mother and a father. Well, then he'll go around and bless a transgender couple or something too, but I mean, or welcome them to the Vatican, big photo ops and all that. But the idea that he says, his teaching is that a child, and I totally agree, deserves a mother and a father. When they actually have that together all the time, they'll have the most balanced presentation of what the father's supposed to be. And then, of course, too, the mother and father both have to be acting like mother and father. You know, so they have that full presentation from the time they're little.
Yeah, and it's just all this stuff is obvious. It's natural law, and then the church with her theology elevates it, gives us a deeper understanding. Marriage is a natural. It's a natural institution, or a natural. You can call it a natural sacrament, but it's also a supernatural sacrament. So it's elevated. All the things that we know about manhood, womanhood, about marriage on a very basic level, it's elevated by what the church teaches. But with guys my age, like you talked about how it's not just being married, but it's being married and having kids. Guys my age, the common trend, even in so-called conservative circles, is, you know, you have a girlfriend and you live with each other for like 4 or 5 years, and then if things are still going smooth, which oftentimes they don't when you're cohabitating, then you get married. But then you get married, and it's not a valid marriage by any means, because they have a dog, but they're willing to have a dog and a cat and take care of those things, but they don't want to have kids. That's a very common trend with guys my age, with girls my age. I actually have a friend from college a couple of years ago. She told me she wanted, I think this is when I was like 22 or 23, and she told me she wanted to work for 10 years and then get married. And it's like, well, that's not really how it works. You gotta, it was kind of just a wild thing to say. But, and then you talked about, Christine, the idea of service that is inherent to having a family, mental illness, and this is not just a Catholic definition of mental illness. M. Scott Peck, who wrote People of the Lie, one of the most famous psychologists of the 20th century, he says that mental illness is a result of living for yourself and not living for something outside yourself. So it goes back to that selfishness, and that's what all that stuff is. The trend of, you know, just living with my girlfriend for a couple years, or getting married, not choosing to have kids. It's just selfishness, yeah. And it's fear kind of overriding there, because you talked about. It's a scary thing, of course, but the faith
There's a new trend going out there with women and men today. There's a traditional men, younger men, I'm noticing a trend that they are kind of like a badge of honor to want to get married, to want to have children, want to have a Catholic family. And women out there, they don't want to go out in the clubs and just be out, floozing around and everything. They actually want to have a good, solid husband now. There's starting to be a trend right there. The problem is society's a long way down the path right now, to be breaking up. So.
Yeah, that seems to be like the new rebellion now, is wanting to be a traditional homemaker and traditional husband, traditional wife. But just to encourage people out there, after seeing those statistics, there are people today who are in broken marriages or broken families. Perhaps it was through their own fault in the past, or perhaps it was through situations beyond their control. But we wanted to encourage these people as well. Obviously, I'm a single mother through circumstances beyond my control. You're not doomed to a life of unhappiness. These are statistics. God can bring greater good out of, things that have happened badly in the past. As long as you submit yourself to his will, resign yourself, and follow him unreservedly, he will bless you, and he will, bring the best out of your situation. So we wanted to encourage anybody out there watching this that God can do wonderful things through you as long as you just follow his will.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of times you can do greater good because of a fall, because of a past, because of problems, which every single person has, but you want to make bank on all of those things, right? And you can actually be more knowledgeable. Mary Magdalene was probably even holier and saintly because of all the problems she had earlier on in her life. And the idea that we always can come out of things even more humble, more generous and kind and everything. It's always a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and it's always a paradox. So the more sorrow that there is, and the more that you embrace that, you don't push it to the side. You don't try and cope with it. But if you embrace that, God brings greater joy out of that. It's always the paradox. It's the paradox of the whole Catholic faith.
It's not that God can just salvage good out of evil. He actually, the teaching of the Catholic Church, he allows evil in order to bring forth a higher good.
Higher good, yeah, that's right. And that's the cross. So we don't have Easter Sunday, the joy of Easter Sunday, without the sorrow of Good Friday, of our Lord's crucifixion. And that's the whole entire, die to yourself, and then, Christ, is able to live in you. The whole thing's a paradox. So the more sorrow there is, there's greater joy to be had if you embrace it.
That is the whole message of the cross. It's redemption. It's redemption. It's coming to save us. But if we, from an early age, just follow what God has set before us and follow our vocations, whether to marriage or to religious life, He wants us to have happiness. That's the whole point. He wants us to be happy in this life and in the next with Him. All right, thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of The Download. Now please join us as we finish in prayer, begging Our Lady's intercession for our nation and our church. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Salve Regina,
Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo et spes nostra salve. A te clamamus exules filii Eve. Ad te suspiramus gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale. Ea ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos, ad nos converte, et Jesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende, o clemens, o pia, o dulcis Virgo Maria. Amen.
Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you again for joining us for The Download. We premiere a new episode like this every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. From all of us here at Church Militant, God bless you.